Okay, so my name is Itza Mendoza, and the claim I will be refuting is that performance enhancement drugs, PEDs, have a positive effect on American sports. My claim is that the evidence my opponent provided fails to prove that PEDs indeed have a positive effect on American sports. I will address each of his secondary claims, which include number 1, that professional sports are more entertaining with the use of PEDs. Number 2, athletes are faster, stronger, and recover quicker, and that these advantages outweigh the side effects of PEDs. And third, athletes have achieved fame through the use of PEDs, which led them to become more philanthropic. To begin, I think it is useful to review the fact that PEDs were considered a problem since the 1960s, and were therefore banned in professional sports in 1988. Currently, PEDs are illegal in the United States unless it is prescribed for medical reasons, which, of course, do not include professional athletes. Having this in mind, let's proceed. To begin, I will address my opponent's claim that professional sports are more entertaining with the use of PEDs. He stated that athletes that choose to take PEDs will start reaching new records that were previously unattainable, which would make sports more entertaining. Although it is true that professional athletes can achieve new records, I don't think he can necessarily claim that fans of American sports would consider sports more entertaining if they knew that their favorite players were actually using PEDs to achieve these records. The fans of Lance Armstrong, A-Rod Rodriguez, and Ryan Braun were undoubtedly amazed with the extraordinary performances of these athletes. But once they tested positive for PEDs, fans felt cheated and lied to. For example, after Ryan Braun tested positive for PEDs, he lost many fans. According to ESPN Sports, no matter how remorseful or contrite Ryan Braun wants to appear, he has a lot of image repair left to do. My opponent also asked us to consider, quote, the illegal use of steroids that have brought about legendary players, including Alexander A-Rod Rodriguez and Ryan Braun. The assumption that it was steroids that produced these players' talent is wrong because steroids are used to enhance their abilities, not give them abilities that they previously did not have, hence they are called performance enhancers. My opponent also mentioned that PEDs, that athletes that use PEDs, such as A-Rod, increase the fan base of the relevant sport. Yet he fails to provide any statistics to prove that they are responsible for an increase in fans. He even failed to give any proof of an actual increase in fans. We are simply left to assume that he is correct because he did not grant us any grounds for this claim. Even if this were true, that fans increased because A-Rod made baseball more entertaining. Once athletes are labeled as PED users, they lose their prestige. For instance, after A-Rod claimed that he did not use PEDs, which of course his test results contradicted, he lost support from his fans. According to Fox News, he was booed loudly each time he walked to the plate. Also, my opponent failed to take into consideration that once athletes are caught using PEDs, they are penalized, more likely suspended for a certain amount of games, and even suspended for life like Lance Armstrong. On July 22, 2013, Braun was caught using PEDs. He was forced to accept a 65-game suspension due to the Major League Baseball investigation of the now-closed Biogenesis of America anti-aging clinic, which was accused of providing bad substances to players. How can Braun bring in more fans, as my opponent claims, when he cannot even play? Clearly, it is illogical to claim that these athletes that use PEDs increase fans because they cannot even play in the first place. To sum my first play, Vazan failed to prove that PEDs have a positive effect on American sports because he did not provide data or any grounds on how athletes that use PEDs increase fans. He also made the erroneous assumption that fans consider sports entertaining if athletes use PEDs because they will achieve new records. Perhaps my opponent meant to say that athletes that have not been caught using illegal substances make sports more entertaining because apparently sports aren't entertaining enough. However, he fails to recognize that we all have different opinions. What might be entertaining for me may not be entertaining for you. Next, I will discuss his secondary claim, which is that athletes are faster, stronger, and recover quicker, and that these advantages outweigh the side effects of PEDs. He stated that stimulants, narcotics, analgesics, beta blockers, EPO, and THG are all drugs that are for pain relief and muscle building. He also gave us a nice example of EPO, which boosts the number of blood cells. This increase in blood cell increases your blood pressure and puts athletes at a greater risk of suffering heart attacks, as stated by my opponent. He then went ahead and claimed that there is no denial of the negatives, which I am in agreement with. But then he states that if anybody should be expected to take these drugs, it should be athletes that are being paid millions of dollars. Well, nobody is expected to use these drugs unless you're a patient that has been prescribed EPO to help with severe anemia. Athletes are not expected to use EPO, which, mentioned by an opponent, can cause them to have high blood pressure, heart attacks, and other serious side effects. Is it really better to risk having a heart attack or high blood pressure and possibly be suspended for games just to moderately enhance the skills that professional athletes already have? Finally, I will address Vasant's third secondary claim, which is that athletes have achieved fame through the use of PEDs, which led them to become more philanthropic. The fact that athletes that use PEDs are philanthropic is not related to the claim that the use of PEDs have a positive effect on American sports. In fact, it is a non sequitur fallacy to say that athletes who have used PEDs to attain fame have become more philanthropic because of their use of PEDs. It is a conclusion that does not logically follow from the previous statement. In conclusion, I believe that the evidence my opponent provided fails to prove that PEDs have a positive effect on American sports. Thank you.
All right, it's pretty easy to follow. You're challenging the premise of the advocate's arguments by suggesting that their grounds are insufficient and definitely suggesting that there are arguments that fit on the other side. For instance, that the fans respond well and are entertained if the users of these performance-enhancing drugs, if just because of their records. I thought that you had some good examples with Ryan Brown and Lance Armstrong as being turned on by the fans. The same thing with A-Rod. I think you could demonstrate, for instance, that the idea that people have cheated or have violated the rules in some way tends to diminish the demand for those athletes or the respect that they commanded, which would probably have a consequent negative impact on their ability to bring in people to the stadium, that sort of thing. It's not that hard to think of some examples, and I think here in Southern California, maybe back 4 or 5 years, all the Dodger fans who got burned by Manny Ramirez, not once, but twice on this, and they were happy to see him get the hell ridden out of town. It's just one of those things where you can find that stuff comes up and people say, oh, it's great when they play well, and but as soon as they get caught, we say, what the hell is going on here? We should have known better, and we got suckered in by that sort of thing. I think that you've got a pretty valid conclusion there. The inference that the advocate was drawing was perhaps a little bit harder to make. The challenge on the reasoning on the last point I thought was pretty straightforward, that the link between philanthropy and using the drugs is just a coincidental non sequitur, as opposed to, they use PEDs and suddenly their wallet opens. It's like, I guess their brain power goes down, and so, oh, you need $100? Here you go, and they write a check for $100,000. I mean, that seems like a very strange argument that the advocate made in the first place. I do think that there is, some discussion about whether or not PEDs could have a role in treating injuries, for instance, that neither side really gets into in this argument, and that might be where there is a little bit more controversy on the subject. All right, thank you.